Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. It's Friday afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm Paul John Dykes. Today I'm joined by Jim Orr and Brian Degnan. It's always an absolute pleasure. We are going to look back on quite a week, and we're going to look forward to the weekend. We have a game coming up. Wow, we've barely even spoken about that. But before we do it, Jim, you joined us in a cast of hundreds last night at Barazart designed to see three of the centenary boys. Brian, you're a similar vintage to me. I was just a wee guy in these guys. I was a fanboy of the centenary team, and last night was no different. Jim, how good were they? They were brilliant.
Yeah, I think the centenary team, modern times, is one of the most beloved teams that there were. Most of the guys are the kind of same age as me, and I think when you have Celtic players of a similar age to you, there's a bit more empathy, I think, with when you kind of think, well, that's my kind of age group. Roy Aitken's in my top 5 Celtic players. Love Roy Aitken. Number of appearances for the club, what he did for the club. I'm on record before. And you asked the question last night, which quite surprised me. I got a name check.
But when I said Jim Orr, everybody just nodded in recognition.
But Roy didn't nod. He was thinking, who's Jim Orr? Anyway, yeah, he should have been manager instead of Liam Brady. That
was quite humble. Wasn't he? He was quite humble last night.
Yes, yeah. I mean, that's the kind of guy he is. He is a very humble guy. And he should have been manager then. And when he left, and then and Tommy Burns had left not long before him, and then Billy O'Neill gets sacked, and then everything goes downhill from there. But in fact, there's a play about that when everything started to go downhill called "And If You Know the History," which if you're looking for the perfect Christmas present, I've got my poster with me. Hold on, the sun is shining. I'll let Mr. Degnan talk.
Highlighting you for the big moment. Brian, I've got to share a couple of wee tales before we get stuck into the topical stuff, right? So last night, I remember going right back to the very first time I wrote a Celtic book. And the first thing I did was I went and spoke to all the historians who had done all this before. I spoke to the late David Potter, I spoke to Pat Woods and Tom Campbell. And what they told me and what they advised me to go and do, they said, go and speak to people who were there. Because, things are archived and documented at the time, and everybody goes back to that same document, and everybody reports on that same information. He says, but if you go and speak to people, they will give you a different take on it, a different hue on the story, information that they've maybe not revealed before. And it doesn't matter how many years later, you're constantly getting new stories. So last night there was 2, and I'm going to have to share them. One of them's quite amusing. The other one is just really interesting because it involved Shay Given, and I'm always going on about Shay Given. I'd love to have Shay Given on This Is Acsom. So the first story, Big Pat, obviously coming over for Glasgow and all that. I think he found it hard initially, and he spoke a wee bit about it, and he was talking about Johnny Kenny, going back to Ireland and scoring goals and how difficult it is to transition over to Scotland as a young kid. And I think that what happened was, speaking to other players, there was a guileless nature within the Celtic dressing room where, it was an unforgiving place and you were going to get slagged off and pranks were going to be played and you really had to take it, right? So anyway, Pat Bonner comes back to training after Christmas and his wife's bought him a really horrific duffel coat. I think it was like a big kind of like, one of the guys that, if you're a lumberjack, one of they things, right? And the guys obviously gave him an absolute pasting for it. So anyway, they get dressed, in their training kit to go training. And on this particular day, they weren't training at Barrowfield. They were running round the track. They're running around the track. So as the guys were getting ready, anyone you speak to will tell you that Roy Aitken was the first in the door and the last to leave at Celtic. So he was ready as the boys are all getting their training kit on. He goes out and he speaks to a guy called Hazy, who I think is still at Celtic Park, by the way, the groundsman. And he gives him Pat Bonner's jacket. And, right, you'll soon find out why. So anyway, Roy Aitken leads the charge and they're pounding round the running track at Celtic Park and they're doing laps and everything else. You can imagine it. It's a cold kind of January morning. And then eventually Roy says to the boys, right, lads, we're going to stop to sing the national anthem, the Soldiers song. And they turned around because you'll remember we had the tricolour. Was it the one above the jungle, Jim? Mm-hmm. And Hazy had actually removed the tricolour and replaced it with Pat Bonner's jacket, right? And it was blowing in the wind. as the guy sang the Soldiers song. And Pat Bonner, I think at the time, probably didn't take it too kindly because he thought his wife might be angry that his jacket was ruined. But Big Pat was the butt of quite a few jokes last night, Jen. You get the impression that it was done in such a way that, when you wind somebody up that you actually like. That was the kind of vibe I was getting.
You never wind people up you don't like. I mean, that's the whole point. That's the whole point of the exercise. But he seemed to really enjoy himself last night. I don't know how many of these kind of like Q&As he does. And maybe he was a bit nervous beforehand, but he seemed to kind of grow into it as we know. Because obviously Peter Grant's done honours in them and Big Roy's done a few. But yeah, they were great. And that was the thing about that team. You could have got Joe Miller up there, Frank McIvenny up there. You could have got a whole host. I mean, in the centenary season, that's what, 36 years ago. So in 36 years' time, I'll not be here, but you'll not get Kyogo in one of your Q&As. You'll not get, Maeda. You'll not get whoever it is. So that's, as I said, it's a beloved team because of the way they played, that swashbuckling style. It was the centenary season. Before it all went downhill, and then there's a player about that. Sorry, I need the button again. And if you know history, it's a perfect Christmas present for the Celtic fan in your life.
I'm just glad we're not wearing Christmas hats today, guys. That would have been really inappropriate. The other tale, Shay Given. I'm of the belief, Brian, and we've spoken about it on this show many times, that if Tommy Burns had a goalie, and I mean, like the type of goalie we've had in the last couple of decades, we've been spoilt for choice, haven't we? With Boric, Forster, Gordon, Hart, Schmeichel. Yeah, Barkas, your personal favourite. If Tommy Burns had a goalie, we'd have won the league. I stick by it all the time. And the one goalie that I always look at was Shay Given, and I know that Pat Bonner spoke about this in his autobiography, but it was good to hear it straight from Packy last night. So basically what happened, you'll remember, Jim, after that season 93-94, whereby Fergus takes over, but we were still rotten on the park, and Lou McCarry was the manager. So he quickly gets rid of Lou McCarry. Pat Bonner's released. He's freed, as is Charlie Nicholas at the end of that season. And they're free agents. Pat Bonner's the only player at the 1994 World Cup who is unattached. So where the wee graphic pops up when Bonner's got the ball on the live telly. It just says Pat Bonner unattached. He never had a club. Unbelievable, right? So at that time, Tommy Burns is at Kilmarnock. He wants Pat Bonner to go as a goalie, but also as a goalkeeper coach. So Pat Bonner pitches something to Tommy and says that there's a young goalkeeper who is leaving Celtic called Shay Given, right? And he's maybe chatting to Kenny Dalglish, because Kenny Dalglish's son Paul played with Shay at Celtic, and he was well aware of him, having come up from Blackburn to watch Paul play. So the deal was Tommy and Pat were going to convince, once they come back for the World Cup, they were going to convince Shay Given to sign for Kilmarnock. He was going to be the number one at Killie, and Pat Bonner was going to be his mentor, right? But anyway, we know what happens. Tommy Burns gets the Celtic job. He then goes back to Charlie Nicholas and Pat Bonner and says, you're no longer freed. We're going to sign you for another season. And then Pat and Tommy go out to speak. In fact, Jim, I think they went out to Ireland, didn't they, to speak to Shay Given and his family, to try and convince him to come back to Celtic with the view that he would be the number one eventually and Pat Bonner would mentor him. But the deal had gone so far down the line, Brian, with Dalglish. It was one of these situations where the minute the big money's getting spoken about, we could not compete. And the rest, as I say, was history, because Wee Given turned out to be no bad goalie.
Yep, he turned out all right. And it's one of those sort of library of stories of almost
sliding doors.
It's amazing sliding doors moments. There's a parallel universe somewhere where Shay Given stayed at Celtic's whole career and Tommy Burns won a treble.
I know.
It's just amazing to think about all these things. But Jim touched on something there that I think is really important, and it probably ties into modern days. That it's going to be amazing to think how we remember the treble winning sides of recent years in 30 years' time. You look at the Centenary squad, you look at the Seville squad, and there's such affection and love and sort of long lasting. Like, we've been hearing these stories for 20 or 30 odd years, and they're still brilliant, and you still want to know these guys. And is it going to be the case? To Jim's point, they're going to sit up there and Matt O'Reilly's going to be doing talk backs about the year he won his treble under Ange. It's just amazing to see how we're going to view that and how we're going to really You know, even when we think about Tommy Burns' team, it's we think about it with such affection because of the style of play, because it was Tommy, because of all the characters involved. We never won anything, but now the past 20 odd years, we've won so much in such a short space of time. And you think, who's going to stand out amongst that? Who are we going to remember? Who's going to be doing this is Acsom in 10 years? You know,
Just us. It'll just be us.
That guy in the white jumper there, him there in the white jumper. I think also it's the fact that it's when the stakes are high, that's when you remember. You know, if that team, Roy Aitken's team, had won the League and Cup double in 1986, then you wouldn't talk about like it's a centenary team. The stakes are really high. We'd blown the league the year before and we should have won it. This is the centenary season. There was all this stuff happening. So the stakes are pretty high then, and that's why they're... And it's also the fact that, as I alluded to before, you get all local lads. I mean, and Peter Grant talks with such enthusiasm and affection and everything. And with the best will in the world, you might get that now from a Callum or a Jamesy or a Tony Ralston. You're not going to get that from anyone else at all. And that's not a bad thing. It's just a fact. It's just where they are. It's just the kind of modern game. And that's why they are. Because there was, I mean, again, here we go, old bloke talking about old days. But there came a point when the sort of foreign imports started to come in. That's when things changed. The whole dynamic of the things changed at that point in time. And that's why you maybe don't look back so much. I mean, Tommy Burns had a team who played a style of football that was good to watch. Individually, do you hark for Pierre Van Hooydonk or Andy Thom, for example, the way you looked at Paul McStay or Charlie Nicholas and stuff like that. Anyway, old bloke talking. I'll shut up now and get my Acsom mug. I'll just plug Acsom mugs. That's my next.
Well done. Yes.
Product placement. And if you know the history poster which I had last time and you ran away.
I'm going to get a sandwich board made for you, Jim.
The perfect Christmas. The comic genius is the comic genius is Des McLean. Get your tickets now. There you go.
I've got to say though,
if we got Jim a Santa hat, but one of those ones where it's like the words rotate across the front, and he's be Acsom. If you know the history, then that's it.
Funny you should say that.
Yeah. Here we go. Yeah, with the ticker tape all the way around his head. Aye. We can organise that.
Hold on, let's sort that out. Right, okay.
We've still got a couple of weeks, right?
Trademark, Jim. Trademark it.
You've done well, Jim. I've got to say, after obviously a wee hiccup, you've done well to re-establish the play. And I was hearing that some of the dates are already selling out. So well done on that.
Yes, we're getting there.
Yeah, well done. It's all about just digging in. There's loads to discuss. Yeah, we were having a wee look back, a wee bit of nostalgia. Nothing wrong with that. And it was great. I won't go through all the stories, but we will be doing more in 2025. So come along and meet these guys and hear their stories. It is fantastic. And Pat Bonner is much maligned these days for his punditry, Jim. We had a wee conversation this morning about this. He's much maligned, much like quite a few other Celtic heroes, if you like.
I don't know. I kind of two views about Pat, I suppose. Pat the player, Pat the pundit. It's quite good, actually. I think it's good that he's a pundit. I think he deserves to be a pundit. I think when you look at some of the other people who are pundits these days, you question why they are pundits. And I've said, I mean, absolutely no disrespect to the guy at all. Cammy Bell, Scott Allen, compared to a Pat Bonner. So Pat Bonner's been there, seen it, done it, domestically, internationally for Ireland, played at World Cups, all this kind of stuff. So if you want a pundit, then I don't see any reason why Pat Bonner's not a good pundit. I think Pat Bonner, the player, he was never quite there. I think if we had, an Arthur Boric or a Fraser Forster in the 80s, who knows what could have happened, maybe European wise. But I also think Packy's about Rob Douglas, that kind of good, solid keeper, good guy. Maybe just know the level because people talk about Robin Seville, not to his face obviously, but you would say, well, if we had Arthur Boric in goals, we might have won in Seville. Same argument with John Hartson, I suppose. But no, I like Packy Bonner, and did a wee video from a play called "And If You Know the History." So
he did.
Everything's good.
Everything is good, Jim. And last week we won the League Cup. Don't know if you noticed, because there's been quite a lot of other chat in and around that. Brian, I've not had an opportunity, and I know it's almost a week later, but I've not had an opportunity to ask you about your day, about the game. We know about the aftermath, and we'll touch on Willie Collum coming out yesterday and obviously throwing a few more ingredients into the meltdown pot. But let's talk about the 3-3 game and winning it on penalties. Brian, did you watch it in the Swindon?
I was in Swindon, but I'd actually just arrived back. I was through in Bournemouth for a Christmas sort of night out, which rolled onto a sort of 2-day, so I was a bit tender. So I arrived back in Swindon just in time for the game to start. So I just watched it at home. But then I got super excited again, and then Monday was basically a write-off. But listen, no, it was amazing, and I think that there's been so much talk about the aftermath of the game, and the meltdown's been absolutely hilarious. But in terms of the actual game itself, I think that it was such an interesting game, and then looking back on it was so interesting as well. Like, and I've got to give Jim, the Oracle, a shout as well. Before the game, I was being characteristically boisterous, and I was saying 3-1, no problem, we'll smash them. And Jim said, no, this will be very close, could go to penalties, we'll see it through. And then, listen, about his superior wisdom as normally, he was absolutely spot on. But on the game, in terms of Celtic, so many times we've spoken about mentality and winning mentality.
Yeah.
And it's still the difference between the two clubs. And obviously you saw that with the aftermath, but to not perform the way we did, I mean, I don't think we were particularly good. I think second half we were better. We showed flashes, but the Rangers made it hard for us, and we weren't quite at our best, and still won the cup. And I think that's the amazing difference, like that sort of mentality to dig in. And Rogers was talking like today or yesterday. So it's never easy to win these games. It's never easy to win trophies. You can never take it for granted. And he's right. Like, watching the game, and it was the first time actually, and this is where I'm surprised at how they're reacting, which we'll talk in a second. But it was the first time playing them recently. I thought, oh, wait a minute, they might have us here. And during the game, I thought this is tense. They're playing well. This is going to be rough, and we saw it through. And I think the players deserve massive credit for that. I thought Taylor.
I wasn't sure if that was me there. Sorry, you froze for a wee second, Brian. And Jim refused to blink, so I wasn't sure if it was me. No, you're not back. You're frozen just now, mate. But
still frozen.
Yeah, I can hear you though. You're just frozen in time, or maybe there's something interesting in the corner of your ceiling that you're looking at. I'm not sure.
He's thinking. That's his thinking look.
That's his thinking look.
Always look to the right when you think. No, he's back.
There we go.
He stopped thinking. He's talking without thinking.
Am I moving?
You're back, mate. You're back. There we go.
It's very exciting.
You're like Max Headroom from 1986.
Max.
I've been called worse. On this podcast. But yeah, no, to sum up my point, I think like they actually played really well. And if I
you think so? Sorry, do you think they played well?
Who, Rangers or Celtic?
I don't think Rangers. They played well.
I think they did purely because I think that they set up really, really effectively to combat us. I say they played well. You need to grade that in a curve compared to how they've been playing. But I think they performed well. I think they kept Callum quiet. I thought they were smart tactically to match Taylor's runs in to the midfield and congest that and isolate Trusty. I thought that seemed to work, and Rodgers had to tweak it a bit. So, for them, it'd be thrown about a penalty decision instead of, nearly winning the cup. I think it's testament to the difference in mentality of the two clubs.
There's the first debate of today then. So Brian says, Jim, he felt Rangers set up well. I was looking obviously at the game. I watched the game back, so I just watched it in the emotion of it. I was getting bear hugged by Lloyd Patrick Jepson, which is never a good idea because I've had a sore shoulder ever since.
He does it all the time. What happens?
He's got that strength about him.
He's a hugger. That's what he does.
He's a hugger. Yes, it was a squeeze. Anyway, the following morning I watched it back, and when you remove that emotional element from it, and you try your best to analyse the game. I felt that the one team that tried to win the game was Celtic, and Rangers were very much combating our style of play. They used the outball. They do use a lot of kind of long ball tactics to punish us. They almost did punish us a few times more. I think the CCV 4v1, just put the Titanic music on that. That was unbelievable. Carter Vickers is a Goliath. And people go on about bad decision making by the Rangers players. Carter Vickers kind of forced that bad decision because his positional play, his anticipation is sensational. But I'm veering on the side of the fact Celtic were not at their best. Absolutely nowhere near their best. but we found a way, Jim, and we're up against a team that you keep saying it very more often than not. The games are tight. I mean, I know that we beat them fairly comfortably earlier this season, but generally speaking, last season the games were tight. That game was tight. That's just what's going to happen. Every now and again, I think we will give them a tanking, but generally speaking, they will play to stop us from playing.
Yeah, I mean, Sunday was a bit of a mixed emotions for me. I couldn't get a ticket, which was a disaster because I usually keep my phone on silent, but my phone was on and I kept it on at 3:15 because I live near Hampden. Nobody phoned, which was...
You should have got that sandwich board on, Jim, and
well, I mean,
Hampden.
I don't like watching games I should be at. I don't like watching games I should be at. I don't mind watching games for Pittodrie and Tynecastle and stuff like that because I've kind of long given up the ghost of trying to get tickets. But when you should be at the game and you're not at the game, I always find that kind of hard. Emotional roller coaster of a game that it was. And then my mother sadly passed away Sunday night, so it was a whole kind of mixed emotions. And
Sorry to hear that, Jim. I didn't realise that.
But get back to the game. I'm bemused when people say it was a classic. I mean, because there was lots of goals, late goals, people say it was a classic. I thought it was a really poor game. I thought we were poor. I think the manager said we were poor. Callum said we were poor. Apart from maybe 15 minutes in the second half when we looked pretty good, we were well below par. We had 70% possession and still win the game. So what does that make the opposition if we 70% possession and we don't play particularly well? They just sat back. And as Lenny said, they kind of set traps. So I think, I think, and when they had the ball, they hoofed it forward. And I actually think they've got a number of really good players. I think they've got a bit of quality in that squad. And if I was their fans, I'd be looking for more than that because we were kind of there for the taking. But I thought Trusty looked really nervous. We weren't playing that particularly well. I just thought, and the goals they scored, Greg Taylor makes the mistake. Engels isn't touched tight. Danilo out jumps Carter Vickers and Wilson 30 seconds after we score. I just thought, history, it was great. We won the cup, which is brilliant. At the end of the day, that's all cup finals are about. And history is written by the winners, obviously. But, it goes out to penalties and anything could have happened. And if we'd have lost in penalties, I think we'd be having a different week and different conversations and we'd be maybe posing different questions. I just think we need a ball playing centre half, somebody who can break the lines, as they call it in kind of modern speak. We just kind of pass teams to death eventually and get through there. Not trying to be negative. I thought it was great. We won the cup. It was just dead exciting. And then there was a non-penalty, which no doubt will...
Might touch on it.
Apparently
there was an update yesterday, guys.
It
happened during the show. And we were actually advised on the comment section that Willie Collum had come out. And I think that, if you're going to come out and say that it was the wrong decision, there's a way to say it, Brian. I mean, for me, he's just thrown everybody under the bus. It's just like everybody who was involved has been thrown right under the bus. And basically, he's come out and says it should have been a penalty. All right, fair enough. Let's move on for that, because you could look at so many games, so many big games, so many decisions, and say the exact same. I mean, there's obviously going to be a national inquiry. The game's going to get replayed, Brian. We're going to get stripped of every single title that we've won in the last 24 seasons because it should have been a penalty. I mean, I would look at that, and I think I'm going to bring up a point here that was highlighted earlier on in relation to one of our guests last night, Peter Grant. Peter Grant was one of the only pundits, if not the only pundit. Here we go. Tony C brings it up, who actually raised the fact that Kuhn got a terrible tackle on him. It was a straight red card in Peter's opinion. And there was many others, and we highlighted this other day, there was many other decisions that went against Celtic during that game. Now, the decision that went against Celtic may not have then resulted in you getting a shot at goal from 12 yards, Brian, but it may have resulted in a red card offence. It may have resulted in, for example, there was 2 tackles actually that I spotted that could have been red card offences on a player who's already on a yellow. So there was the impeding of Carter Vickers at the second goal. You could do it every single game, Brian, but it's like the fact that the media have jumped on the bandwagon is the biggest thing for me, Brian, because Aberdeen didn't get the same kind of coverage last year, did they?
No, and it's just this sort of massive overreaction that I find quite incredible. Like, I can't believe this is the first time a referee's ever got or a VAR's ever got a decision wrong. I was stunned to hear that, because it must be, because that's the reaction.
Yeah.
It's absolute insanity. Like, you know, and that was my point earlier about the weakness in mentality, because they're clinging to this to say, well, if we'd have got that, we'd have definitely won. And we
We'd have
didn't win
definitely
because everything's
scored,
against
Brian.
us.
Because you get the penalty, it means you must have scored the penalty.
And then we stop reacting and don't try and respond the way we did, several times during the game. I mean, it's just nonsense. And apart from the fact that the penalty decisions, red cards, fouls always go against some teams and some others. Last season particularly, we had Al Morrison, the great piece about all the penalties Rangers were getting.
Yeah.
And you can take that, whatever way you want it. You can buy into it, you can question it, you can whatever. But there was never this national inquiry about it. It became a joke. It was a penalty Rangers joke. And yet they get denied a penalty, which, by the way, none of the players called for. None of our players reacted like they gave away a penalty. Their manager never reacted like it. Their fans weren't screaming in the stadium for a penalty. It's only afterward they then go, oh, it's definitely a penalty. Say, well, none of you spotted it. None of the players called for it. No one in the park noticed it. Your manager never noticed it. But all of a sudden, it's such an obvious penalty. Now, I saw it back in the replay, and I didn't think it was a penalty at the time. And then I was informed that because he was pulled and his shoulder was in the box when he was pulled, that's the penalty. Fair enough, right? It happens. It happens. That's it. It's nothing new. It's certainly nothing new to Celtic fans. It's nothing new to the rest of the SPFL. And you can say, well, VAR are looking at it. They've made mistakes before. Look at Brendan Rodgers. He called it for calling it a mistake. When it was the Yang get the red card at Hearts.
Yeah.
People are fallible and make mistakes. You can't then say that's cost us competition, that's cheating, these people need sacked, it's a conspiracy. It's utter nonsense. And the last point I make on it about the weakness of mentality, see, and every team in the world's guilty of this and every fan's guilty of this, so it's not just them, but if you say that one decision cost us the game, I would question what we're doing for the rest of the game, because you've got 90 odd other minutes or 120 other minutes to win a game of football. It's not just that one decision. Now, fair enough, if it's a red card in the first minute, you're down to 10 men, I understand. But to claim in this hyperactive reaction is mind-boggling. And actually, the same weekend, I think, I'm sure it was Motherwell were denied a penalty they should probably go at Dundee United.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's been off their nut at that. And I don't even know if Willie Collum mentioned it. So it's just, it drives me nuts. It's just a massive overreaction, and we're playing into this narrative. And I think Brendan Rodgers called it out today, actually, or yesterday, and used the word narrative. And I think that's what it is.
I think this is different. I do think this is different. And I agree with all the stuff you said at the end, Brian, about, that anything could have happened in the game. If they got the penalty, you could have missed it because they only won 6-3. Anything could have happened. But I think Scottish football was a bit of a soap opera at the best of times. And with social media, it's kind of 24/7. But I think this was a big thing. This was different because they'd so much time to get that right. And I'm like any most other Celtic fans that I've said on the podcast a number of times, I'm not a big fan of VAR. I don't think VAR will ever work. I don't think bringing in two referees is not a good idea, I think, and it's just rubbish. And I can talk about it in a minute. But in terms of the specific of the game, I thought Beaton blew his whistle too quickly, and he gave a foul, and so it was a foul. So it didn't matter what happened after that. But having seen the Willie Collum thing yesterday, he says a penalty, so he's the expert. So to play devil's advocate, then fine. And I think if the shoe was on the other foot, we'd be going ballistic as well, I think. So I understand the reaction. When you hear the audio of it, Alan Muir, which is quite funny, obviously, he's so quick. And he says something along the lines of, could be in, could be out, let's just call it out. And he's so dismissive. And it's such a bizarre thing to do, because on the same programme, they showed St Johnstone against Rangers. And that took forever. And those guys were forensic, and that was a nothing game, a league game. Obviously, every game's important within the league. It was a nothing game, and they were forensic in their analysis of that. Muir says, well, I think it's more out and in, leave it. And if that was us and that happened to us, we'd be going ballistic as well. So I think they've got every right to be really angry.
But Jim, how many times has it happened to us where we've
no.
against us?
That's never happened the way that happened there.
Well, how do we
in
know
the box, out the box?
And how do we know it's not happened? That's how do we know the VR has that conversation up with other teams?
You mentioned the Yang incident.
We can't say that.
Aye, but you mentioned
so different to every other decision that goes wrong. That's what I push back on. I get the point about it was done quickly, but we don't know if that's always done quickly. We've not seen everything.
We don't always hear the audio. Yeah.
And if it was another club, would we see the VAR? Well, clearly not, because there's so much focus on their reaction that everyone's seen the VAR now. That doesn't happen. And that's
Jim, have we had something similar? I mean, penalty decisions have gone against us in respect. Remember Matt O'Reilly, Kilmarnock, where the ball hits him in the hand, or the Iwata backward handball. And we discussed it.
Totally get that. But that was interpretation, and you say, well, was it really a handball or not? Right, and once you say we think it's a handball, it's inside the box. They had plenty of time to get that right, and they rushed that decision. And it's a cup final, and it's an extra time, and it's a classic game apparently as well. Maybe he'd cramp Alan Muir for all we know. And then you think, well, Willie Collum talked about learning lessons. Maybe Willie Collum should have been in the VAR room, given it was a cup final. Now, I'm like every other paranoid Celtic fans. Over the years, I think we have got more decisions against us than for us. And then when VAR came in, like Celtic fans, oh, this will sort it. This will make it better. And in fact, I think over the last 2 years, it's made it worse. Because if you're a Celtic fan, your perception is that we've got another referee. So if the first referee doesn't give them a penalty, the second one will. And I think, in my humble opinion, I don't have the stats behind it, in the past couple of years, I think they have benefited from that. And a lot of run-of-the-mill games, a Ross County here, a Livingston there. You think, what's that penalty for, whatever? But I think, and I'm trying to be as honest as I can be, that in certainly last season and then last week, the big decisions in the Glasgow derbies have went for us. I think they're the right decisions, don't get me wrong. I think VAR's got it right. But if you go back to the first Ibrox game last season with the Dessers foul and the Roof goal, the on-field referee gave that as a goal. Right? And you could, I think it was the right decision, but you could say, I'm not so sure. And that was the game we go to Ibrox with Scale and Lagerbielke as the back two. We've got an injury crisis. It was after 20 minutes. So if they score after 20 minutes, there's no away fans. Who knows? Again, they could have won that game. That could have been season-defining. But we got a wee break there. The Matt O'Reilly goal that we got in the New Year's game, that wasn't given on field. We got that. I think they scored a second goal and they brought it all the way back. And VAR chalked it, albeit they got the Sandaza goal. So I think we benefited in that game. And the cup final turns on the Seema goal. Now, I'm not saying they weren't the right decisions, but I'm saying that the fact we've got VAR now and those big games has came to our benefit. I think what happened last Sunday, like yourself, Brim, I saw it at first, I thought it's not a penalty. And the fact that nobody made a big deal of it. And I think Philip Clement has used that as a complete smokescreen. Because, as I said earlier, I think they're better than they played. So if I was a Rangers fan and I'd lost that game, you would question his tactics, you would question his substitutions, you would question his choice of penalty takers, you would question all that stuff. And if I'm Philip Clement and I'm thinking, I've played Celtic 6 times and I can't touch them, I'll just deflect this and I'll say to you guys out there, you go and dig, keep digging, because I don't want people to analyse this again because I've not won this game. And then when you do look at the incident, Willie Collum, who's head of referees, says it's a penalty kick. And the guys got that wrong and they had all the time in the world to get it wrong. We've had decisions against us, Yang, O'Reilly, Hatate, and all these things, but they weren't like last week. Last week, I think, was a kind of, for the first of its kind. And if we were the other side of that, I think we'd be going ballistic anyway. But having said all that, we should play the game again because we're a club like no other and make sure they get a ticket. I think that's an ideal.
If we played that again, we'd pump them 4-0. But
of course,
anyway,
we'd pump them 4-0 because we're a club like no other. That's how it works.
What I found interesting, again, going back to last night, Peter Grant said he looked at Clement at the time of the incident and the aftermath of the incident, and Clement did not react. So you're spot on. After the game, and there's been occasions as well where Clement's been briefed by whoever at the club briefs him before he goes in, and then it's my phone's red hot and all this kind of stuff, right? So absolutely, that
was me. I was phoning him. That was me.
You were phoning him for tickets, Jim. It's just drama, and that's exactly what it is, right? But in relation to what I found quite funny was I said, right, there's two instances, there's two fouls. That was my take on it. There's two fouls. Yeah. One of them's the shot pull, one of them's a kick. And the amount of people that says, you don't know the rules. Well, every single one that said, I don't know the rules, then stated that because his foot was on the line, it was a penalty. Willie Collum said that's not the case yesterday. So they don't know the rules. Willie Collum could have made that video look any more sinister. It was all quite low lit, wasn't it? Put a bit of light in the room, lads. Christ almighty, man. We're just talking about a penalty kick.
I mean, I was a big fan of Willie Collum as a referee, but I think he's actually making a very good job of this referee supervisor guy, because he comes across as quite an intelligent, articulate guy. And I think what we wanted was transparency and accountability. And I think he's given us that, you know. And if you're a fan of the other team, you're not happy at that decision. But I don't think you can blame Willie Collum for that. Willie Collum is just in post. He didn't pick those referees. He wasn't. He didn't make that decision. And that's why I kind of thought maybe if it's a cut, because he was talking about lessons learned and what do you change. I would have thought if it's a cup final, the head of referees should be in the VAR room, because that's the biggest.
That's actually a really good shout, Jim. Right, because the one thing I would say is whoever's in the VAR room should have that same knowledge, that depth of knowledge that Willie Collum has. That's the first thing I would say. But if they don't, and at this moment in time, we don't have the standard right, and I think that Willie Collum is pushing for full-time referees, eventually that's the long-term aim, then someone who does have that depth of knowledge, Brian, should be sitting in there supervising it. So all the mistakes they're making are rectified in live time, Brian.
Yeah, and I sort of understand that point. I think the only thing you say there is everyone's fallible, right? Everyone can make a mistake. So if you had the referees in there, he makes a mistake, who looks after him? So it means he could go in. You need to trust the people that are in the job. And obviously in this occasion they got it wrong. But I still think, you know, and I saw Mo Sizzler in the comments saying I'm just biased and because I'm a Celtic fan.
I am biased, Brian. I say it every day. I'm biased because I'm a Celtic fan.
I'm biased.
I get it.
My name's Jim and I'm biased. It's over to you.
If Mo and anybody else that thinks that would pay attention to what I'm saying, I've already said that I thought it was a penalty. I already said I thought they played quite well. But my point is, if every VAR decision that is possibly a mistake, we've not seen every single one dissected to the level that this has been publicly.
No.
And that's my issue with it. I think it was the wrong call. I think, you know, they done it too quickly, to Jim's point. But I think if we go down this route of every VAR decision being like, so we need the audio for every VAR decision that's been made in every Scottish football game.
That's there, Brian.
And then you're questioning it, and then the referees coming out, head referees, and apologising for it. You need to do that. If they're going to do it, fine, but they need to do it for everyone, for every decision. And I guess it's a cup final. I get it's a cup final, but the fact is, there's been other cup finals, there's been other big important games. Every game's relative to everyone else. If you're fighting relegation and it's a 6-pointer, it's not a cup final, it's a league game, but it's really important to your club. So then, if there's a decision that doesn't go your way, what the president said is, you can then demand to hear the VAR and ask for an apology. And if you go down that route, it's a madness. And all it's going to do is, to your other point, is create a smokescreen around the real problems or the real issues or the real discussions. It's going to put more pressure on referees to make decisions that they think are going to make them popular or going to give them the least scrutiny. And if we keep scaremongering like that, every club, it's going to get worse. That's why I think this decision, not the decision in the game, the decision for Willie Collum to say, essentially throw his officials under the bus, and for the VAR to be released, and for all that stuff, I think that's where I have an issue with. No, the decision itself, because I agree it was a penalty.
But the audio is available for every single game. Everyone has access to that. It's a cup final. It's going to get that kind of scrutiny because it's the cup final. And I think, you might think it's a bit over the top, but it's because it was the cup final. And I think if you look back to last year's League Cup final when there was a foul on Duke in the last minute of the game, well, that's subject to interpretation. It might have been a foul, might not have been. And that's what, in my humble opinion, that's what makes this one so different. Because everyone's saying it's a definite foul and it's definitely inside the box, but yet the VAR said, no, it's not. And they took like 10 seconds to decide that. In a major cup final, in extra time with the two biggest clubs in the land, with huge amount of scrutiny, it's inexplicable. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad because we benefit from that. And one of the things I've said before is the reason I don't think VAR works and VAR will never work is because it's a second referee in there somewhere. And as I said before, I like the VA, throw the R away, as the proclaimers would say, because video assistance, I think, is good. And what I've said before is that the biggest losers in any of this kind of stuff are the managers. They're the guys that are coming out, like Clement did, and said, why didn't this go to VAR? Why? And what I've said before is give them 3 challenges. That's it. So he had a challenge that the other day, and they take their time on it, and Beaton would have come across to the screen and took his time and did that. And then Clement, he obviously given the penalty, but that's his challenge. 3 a game, that's it. No more. Because what we've got just now is we're not sure what's happening in the VAR room and what referee number 2 thinks. And it's hard enough to deal with referee number 1. And he's got a pal up the road who might think differently, and it's all over the place. I just think, just to finish this, because I'm ranting on a wee bit, I think this was a different decision to what we've seen before. Ones like Duke, ones like Yang, ones like O'Reilly, stuff like that, they're different for me. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad it's worked out the way it worked out because we've won the cup and it's great. But I just think it's a different decision altogether.
See, the thing though, I'm not buying the fact that people are now saying it was a stonewaller because nobody shouted for it at the time. The referee didn't think it was. The 2 guys at VAR didn't think it was. That is by very definition not a stonewaller.
But that's where VAR then comes in, Paul, because then nobody thinks it's a penalty. I didn't think it. You didn't think it. Brian think it. And then when you see it again, you think, what's a penalty?
But see the thing you mentioned before about calling him over, again, Willie Collum confirmed that would never have happened. The ref was never been called over because it was a material error.
But in my system,
yeah,
in my system, it's a different system. Paul.
But you're removing R's and everything from your system. You're tearing it up.
If my system was implemented then, we wouldn't have had this controversy last week. It'd have been sorted.
I know.
Because John Beaton would have given the penalty. If you walked out, I think if it was up to John Beaton and he walked over to a screen and watched that, he'd have given the penalty. You know?
Yeah. I agree with you. And the pressure obviously was on, but there has definitely been a smokescreen. Yeah. I mean, I would rather be saying, rather than claiming that Kuhn fouled somebody before his goal, I would be, as a fan and as a teammate and etc., I'd be looking at the player on the deck saying, why are you still on the deck when Kuhn gets the ball? When Kuhn gets the ball back, you're still sitting there with your arm up. Nonsense. So Celtic won the cup. We move on. Claire, great to see you last night, Claire. Great to see you back on the mend. Excellent event last night. Thanks to Paul John, Chris, Double Denim, Lawrence, and of course, Packy, Roy, and Peter. Jim Moore doesn't get a thank you, but no problem. Henrik McLarson, I'm listening to this to avoid wrapping Christmas presents. Mate, it's going to have to be done. You're going to have to do it. So as soon as this is finished, just get the scissors and the sellotape it. Go and find your rosy paper, whatever they are, and get it done. Just get it done. You'll feel better for it. Jungle Lion, if Tierney is fit, let's talk a wee bit about Tierney. Would he have made that mistake that Scalesy made? Who knows? If he's fit and remains fit, it's a no-brainer. Right, let's set the scene a little bit here, ladies and gentlemen, because there was the introduction of a Kieran Tierney klaxon on Acsom, because we spoke about him so often. We were told it was pie in the sky. It's never going to happen. He makes too much money. We'll never, ever see him back in a Celtic jersey, etc., etc. And it continues and rumbles on. It becomes that kind of thing that, you know, every transfer window, certain players are mentioned for a return to Celtic until they retire. Right. What we know and what we have been informed by very, very good sources is in the summer, Brendan Rodgers' biggest target was to bring Kieran Tierney back to Celtic Football Club. And then he got injured for Scotland. It was a muscle off the tear injury, and he's been recuperating ever since. We believe, from the information we were given, that Brendan Rodgers would have done a deal in the summer. It didn't happen. We brought in Baye as a backup. We're running with Taylor, who's not been offered a contract that he will accept. And now these rumours re-emerge. They've been running on all the mainstream channels now, Jim. Add sometimes a bit of credence to the rumours and the gossip. Kieran Tierney, he made his long-awaited return for Arsenal during the week, and he's been linked to a sensational return to the hoops. What's your thoughts, Jim Orr?
Well, I think you look to improve every single position on the park, and I think left back has been highlighted as something that we need to sort out. I think I've said before, Greg Taylor works pretty well within the system that we play just now. That's not Kieran Tierney's way of playing, so maybe is Brendan thinking of shaking things up and maybe going 3 at the back or something like that. So he's never going to play that, inverted fullback role. So I think that's quite interesting to start off with. In terms of the player himself, yeah, I mean, he's a quality player. If he came back, he's obviously going to take over the captaincy when Callum goes. Died in a real Celtic fan. He's made his money. I'm sure he's a rich young man. But then again, it depends what he wants to do in the game. There'll be a bit of kind of some people need to come back with his tail between his legs, and he hasn't made it down there. And so, is he ambitious? Does he want to kind of try and cut it down there? Maybe try and get another big team down there? But he's been out of the limelight for quite a while now. So, would I take him as a player? Absolutely. If it upsets the pay structure, no so sure about that. Injury prone, still seems to be. So, on balance, I would take him, but I think it's a bit of a risky one.
The other thing that we have been told, remember the pictures, the great pictures, Brian, of him and Brendan at the foundation event fairly recently. He was asked by someone who shall remain nameless whether or not he would come back to Celtic, and he said he wants to make it happen. So Tierney's up for it. Celtic are up for it. Obviously, the financial element that Jim talks about is a huge stumbling block. I know that when I spoke to Alan Morrison about it, he says, how can we make this? How can we do a deal with a player who's making 120 grand a week? How can we do that deal? I mean, let's be really realistic about this. He would be the highest paid player, but we couldn't smash our wage structure, Brian. We couldn't start paying players 50 grand a week because the wage structure is part of the way that this club is run, and we know that it is operated financially very, very well, and nobody ever says otherwise on here. We couldn't smash that, even for a player like Kieran Tierney. Yeah, there's concerns about his injury woes. I think that might put off the likes of Newcastle, who are also interested in the summer. It doesn't seem to have put us off. Brendan Rodgers was asked about it this morning on Sky Sports, and he gave his usual non-committal answer. He's very good at batting these questions away, Brian. Is it something like the Paddy Roberts is going to return and all these other guys are going to return? Do we need to get over it? Do we need to find the next Kieran Tierney? Or do we go back to KT and bring him home?
I think you can do both, to be fair. I think you can bring Kieran back while still looking for a long-term replacement, still looking to improve. I think, to Jim's point there, you're always looking to improve. And if you're looking at it on paper, with Kieran Tierney being an improvement we've got, 100%. Would he want to come back? 100%. In terms of the wage structure, my expectation would be to get the highest wages we currently offer within that structure, and that would probably be what they give him. I think you'd be aware of that, I would imagine. People say, he's crazy to drop down for that amount of money just to come back to Celtic. Well, he's clearly coming back because he's maybe a homebody, wants to come back to the club, and he obviously knows to do that. He's going to have to drop down wages. Now, that he's still going to be a very wealthy young man on the wages he's going to get to Celtic, despite all the money he's already earned at Arsenal. So I don't know how much a concern that will be. If I think if it was about money, he could probably go to another Premier League team. You look at teams like Fulham, Nottingham Forest, Leicester, any of these teams, he could walk into those teams no problem and get an equivalent amount of money. So I don't think as fans we should be concerned about the wage structure and stuff. I don't think it's going to matter. We're never going to spend, give him 90 grand a week and everybody else in the squad gets considerably less. That's not going to happen. I think it'll be within the pay structure, and I think Kieran will be happy with that. And then that mitigates a lot of the risk, because again, obviously he has had a lot of injuries, and that's obviously why, to my initial point there, you still need someone else. You still need that backup. You still need that long-term replacement as well. But I think Kieran Tierney on his day is an exceptional footballer. I think he'd give his heart and soul for the club. I think he'd be a massive boost for the fans, the club and the team. So for me, it's an absolute no-brainer to have him back. I'd have him back tomorrow.
I think also at times you don't really think of football players as actual workers.
Yeah.
You think of them as these kind of fantasy people over there. And it's the kind of age-old dilemma between ambition and job satisfaction, I think. And I think if he's an ambitious guy, he's not coming back. But if he wants job satisfaction, he's back tomorrow because he would love it back here, and that's the question for him.
The big thing as well, you know, he might be looking at the fact that 27 is no age at all, right? But in terms of that critical period of your career, I used to always look at 27 as almost being hitting your peak. And then you're maybe thinking, we keep going on about Greg Taylor, this is the peak time for him to get the biggest deal of his life. He's never going to get another opportunity. This is maybe an opportunity for Kieran to start looking at after the game. And I'm not expecting him to retire within the next couple of years, but let's say 5 years down the line, where he's sitting at the same age as Jamesy Forrest, and he's thinking, right, what do I do next? Where does he want to do that? Does he want to be at a Sunderland? Does he want to be at a Newcastle or you know, a Premiership team or a Championship team in England? Does he want to be there and looking at his next move, or does he want to be back home at Celtic and start to look at his next stage of his career? Probably, I would say that's in his thoughts as well.
You've also got the third factor, which is a family life. So we have no idea what Kieran Tierney's family life is like. So you come up the road, then one assumes that the job satisfaction and the family life trump the ambition over here. But that's a decision everyone has to make. Everyone who works has to make those kind of decisions. So,
yeah. And see on your point earlier, because I think it's a good shout about the system change. So I think, and I've said it numerous times, and it's not like I go at Greg Taylor. Again, for those in the comments that weren't listening, I did compliment him earlier, but I think that he definitely fits your system better. I think Valle fits your system. I think we just look a bit more balanced when you've got that traditional fullback. I thought it was the same when Vi came on. I just think we looked a bit more expansive. It looked a bit more structured. So I think KT or a KT-like player suits that system better. I think we've been playing the inverted one to get the best out of Taylor. I think we've almost compromised to fit him in, which makes sense. Obviously, if you're a manager, you want to get the best out of your players. But I think we've sort of almost not created that position, but I think we've lent towards tweaking the system for the inverted role to suit Taylor, as opposed to that being Brendan's preference. So I think from a football perspective, KT or a guy like him coming back would definitely suit as well.
You know, the thing with Kieran Tierney, and we are speaking about him because it's obviously been covered extensively at the moment, not just because we're obsessed with a return for Kieran Tierney. You look at the football that he played in that 3 seasons where he was basically an ever-present. He played 135 games in 3 seasons prior to leaving for Arsenal. And then, you know, he was playing on a regular basis for Arsenal. It brings to mind something that was said last night, Jim, I don't know if you recall it. Roy Aitken, in 15 years at Celtic, listen to this, guys, right?
2 games, yeah.
He was unfit, injured for 2 games in 15 years. He followed up by saying he missed plenty through suspension. But 2 games. He missed 2 games through injury. Yeah. That is unbelievable. I mean, and back then, you know, in terms of sports science and diet, and it just was nowhere near where we are now.
The very small squads as well. Roy made that point as well. That, you know, but they went with squads of 16, 17 players, I think. So you couldn't be injured. You had to play.
You had to play. And what type of a player would we have now? Because I always think of Tierney just careering up that wing, the overlapping fullback type of player, Brian, and, you know, the goal against Man City, and that type of guy that just was getting physically more and more of a powerhouse at that stage. He's not that player anymore. He's not that type of player. And you think to yourself that if we could play more to his strengths, we might get more out of him and manage him differently as well, Brian. So it might not just be a case of that traditional overlapping fullback kind of thing. You know, he might be a player that might even, because he's done it internationally, step inside and play in the central kind of defensive area as well, Brian, as he gets into that kind of 30-year-old footballer. So if anybody's going to manage it, Brendan Rodgers can manage it, I believe. But
I think that's an interesting point, sorry, but in there, that we get Kieran Tierney back, but we don't have him playing the Kieran Tierney role that we knew, because I think that he would work well in a back three as the left, or he might work well as a wing back in a 3-5-2 or something like that. So I think it's quite an interesting point to think that if we were playing the way we played before, with he's bombing up down the wing and he's crossing the ball and stuff like that, you think, he'd be a good idea. but he wouldn't fit in this system. So discuss. Yeah.
We shall see. But the left back will be something. I'm sure there'll be quite a few moves in and out in January in relation to left backs. We've got Bernabeu, of course, the Greg Taylor situation. It does look as though Bailly will remain until the end of the season. We do have a game coming up, guys, and 5 minutes to discuss it. Dundee United away. I was reading this morning, Jamesy Forrest is injured. He's out for 6 weeks. I think that highlights another key area that we need to focus on in January. And Alistair Johnson will also miss out. So you're looking at a right-hand side of the park that obviously will have Tony Ralston playing. And the backup will be probably Yang rather than Jamesy Forrest. Palmer is out of favour. But it does highlight, Brian, the fact that there's still a wee bit of work. There's still tweaks to be done with this squad, isn't there?
Yeah, I think we kind of said at the start of the season we needed an extra winger in. I imagine this is a good opportunity for Yang if he's going to rotate to really, because he's actually played a little bit more than I expected this season. I don't know if that's been necessity over sort of preference, but I think it's a good opportunity for him because I don't think Palmer's got a future. I think that seems to be fairly clear. Good player, just not good enough for I'm not the right player for Celtic rather. So I think that it would be key that we get another winger, probably a left back, and then I would imagine if Norowski and Welsh go or one of them goes, we probably need a right centre back as well. Unless Big Dane Murray, who I've been harping on since I appeared on a show about 4 years ago, finally makes the step up. I'd love to see that.
We must pause for a moment, Brian. You started the Dane Murray supporters club, the fan club, right? You did. You have been banging on about this kid since he made his debut against Midtjylland. So what's happened, right? He's been loaned out to Queen's Park, and apparently he's been absolutely tremendous to the point where Celtic are expecting bids in January for a permanent move. So when you hear that he's coming back, there's two ways that could go, and I hope it's the first. The first would be he's coming back because he's going to be part of the squad. He's going to be one of those homegrown players when we re-register the Champions League squad, for example, Brian, that he could then maybe start, making his way back into the squad. Or maybe we've had some ridiculous offer because apparently he has been pinging on the radars of many teams all over Europe because that's what happens. I was given a wee bit of an insight there yesterday. We were interviewing Sam Wardrop. I don't know if you remember him. He was at Celtic with Kieran Tierney coming through the ranks. And he was talking about not only the scouting aspects of, how, clubs have got access to Y-Scout and various other programs. He says it's not just data, it's also video, right? So it goes that, there's an under 15 team playing somewhere in the world and you can watch the game. You can sit and scout the game. So not only would it tell you Brian's attributes, you can also watch the action, Brian. That is just taking this to another level. And if you've got the access code to get in there, you can be watching all these players. So you're not even leave it. It's not the old school. Remember when you played football and there was an old guy in a trench coat with a notepad and you're like, oh, there's a scout at the game. That kind of thing's dying.
He was a scout, we're only quite sure.
Yeah. Just an old guy with He's always here.
I know, exactly. You were the hat.
It's a different discussion.
Yeah. No, that is a different discussion. So the whole scouting thing's completely changed. And Dane Murray has obviously been, there's been clubs alerted to his performances, albeit at a championship level in Scotland. So it may well be, Brian, he's coming back to replace Stephen Welsh, who might be on his way out, and we need the homegrown, obviously, quota. Or indeed, we're bringing him back to Boston Label him and move him on. I hope it's the first option.
Yeah, it'd be good to see. Again, it's good to see one of the young guys come through, and you'd be excited to see it. I'm also really excited to see the Acsom Christmas Day podcast hosted by Paddy Lavery and Jungle Lion. Apparently, they've arranged that in the comments.
Oh, brilliant!
So thanks very much, gents.
I hope it's at Jungle Lion's outhouse because that place looks tremendous.
No, it's tremendous, yeah. So I'm looking forward to that, gents.
I hope I'm invited. Yeah, we're talking about the weekend's game, Jim. We're talking about Tannadice. It's a destination that we haven't played at since Brendan came back. Obviously, they have, I think, done really, really well since they were promoted into the division. They seem to have done it under the radar, Jim. They're not getting massive plaudits. They're sitting fifth in the league. This is no way a given, is it? Going over to Tannadice and thinking we're going to come away with an easy game, particularly when you've got a couple of injuries to contend with as well, Jim.
I think they made a good start. They've stuttered a wee bit in the past few games, and Motherwell overtook them last week. The team have been off for a week. It's an away fixture. You play your strongest team. You don't rotate for me, because that could be a pretty tricky game. We've got 2 home games coming up against Motherwell, St Johnstone, is it, in the next week or so. And not to underestimate them, but if you're going to rotate, I would do that for the home games. I think we play our strongest team in Sunday, isn't it? Sunday.
It is Sunday, yeah.
Strongest team on Sunday. And I might play Luke McCowan. I'd maybe put him in there. Maybe kind of Dundee edge, doing that. Because he's been great. And maybe McCowan in there for McCowan, Bernardo, Calmack. And the rest of the team picks itself, I think.
Okay, looking forward to it. We'll be covering the game as we always do, half an hour before kickoff. Big shout out to everybody who messaged me through all the various platforms over the last 24 hours. It's much appreciated in relation to your support. You're always there to support us, so thank you very much. Really busy this week. There's so many thousands of people tuning in, and it's brilliant because we're all here to talk about that one thing we love and that one thing that binds us together, and that's Celtic Football Club. So thank you all. Enjoy your weekend. And Henrik McLaughlin, get the Christmas presents wrapped up, mate. Then you can chill with a wee sherry this evening. We'll see you back on Sunday on a Celtic State of Mind.
Cheers, Paul.